Amen.
Oh, hold on. Okay. All right, everybody. Just a couple of things that I want to say first as we begin this conversation. First of all, Justice and Beyond is not a 501c3 or a 501c4. We are a loose organization of different organizations and individual people that come together to discuss important issues. We'd like to focus those important issues on the things that impact mainly Black and Brown people. And so we want those voices to be heard and to be amplified, and for people to come into this space to be educated about those issues. Then they can go out and act and move the needle and make effective change wherever that might be on these issues. We have been doing this organizing for nearly a decade and continue to do it throughout the pandemic and even now by way of this platform. We meet by way of this platform by Zoom every Monday at this same time. Our desire is to get more people educated and involved and engaged in Justice and Beyond. Also know this, there are planners for Justice and Beyond. This work doesn't just come together. There are many people that work behind the scenes to make sure that it happens. They are called our pillars. They are either individual people or organizations that have committed themselves to making sure we pull this off every Monday. We have those meetings on Tuesday at 4:30 by this very same Zoom link. We would love for you to join us and get involved in making this happen. That is all. Let me just say this: a couple of things. Zoom bombing. It's a real thing. It happens. Unfortunately, we live in that world today. We have to be very conscious and aware that it can happen at any time. If, in fact, we are Zoom bombed, we will shut down this Zoom conversation immediately and start it back up immediately, believing that we have eliminated the one who has caused the problem and the issue. And so if we shut it down, just come back on and believe we've rendered the issue. With that said, also too, if you are not getting our newsletter regularly that's updating you what our forums are, then please give your name and email address to Brooke Randolph. I believe you can find her in the list of those attendees. And please give her your information and we'll make sure that you get updated about when we're meeting. With that said, we're going to go ahead and begin with our discussion. So glad again that James Gray and Christopher Johnson have joined us at a very short notice. Always love that when people step in. I'm going to ask them both to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their work. And so, Mr. James Gray, so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. Would you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you're working on, please?
Well, I am so old that I can't tell you about everything because it'll take too long. But I will say this. I first got involved in politics at a time, and I don't remember. I was probably about 8 years old when I started knocking doors and handing out literature for the Second Ward Voters League in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Not really Baton Rouge, but in Scotlandville. I came to New Orleans in about 77, and I would say for the first 30 years, there was probably never an election cycle. Actually, I would say up until now, there has not been an election cycle where I wasn't trying to campaign for someone. And many times, someone was someone I picked by any, meeny, miny, mo, because I didn't have a friend or anyone I knew real well. But I was told that you were always supposed to be involved. Um, uh, I uh, Many of you may know that I spent about 5 years as city councilman here in the city of New Orleans. Uh, I spent a year or so as the executive director of the State Democratic Party. I spent about 10 years as the head of the Board of Election Supervisors in Orleans Parish because I was the uh, chairman of the Orleans Parish Democratic Executive Committee. Um, so I've been around a long time. I've done a lot of things in politics, and I will have at least an opinion about anything that comes up tonight. Whether or not everyone agrees that it is the right opinion or not, uh, I guess we would have a discussion about that. But,
All right. Thank
that's
you.
it.
All right, appreciate that. Uh, Christopher Johnson, would you please, first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I am Jay Christopher Johnson. I'm the founding executive director of the Mobilizing Millennials organization that was founded here in 2019, where our purpose is to train leaders to become politically literate and civically engaged. And so it looks like workshops, seminars, capacity building, technical assistance, and that sort of thing. I also serve as the second vice chairperson of the Jefferson Parish Democratic Executive Committee. But yeah, that's just to give a little insight about that brief background. I can go into a tangent about all of what I'm involved in and what I have been involved in, but nonetheless, definitely excited to be here. I'm not speaking in any official capacity, so definitely anything in which I say on tonight is definitely of my own will and accord.
All right, very good, very good. Thank you, Jay Christopher. Always appreciate you being in this space and along with all of us tonight. It's just good to be here for this discussion about getting young people to vote. Let's just take a look at the landscape, where we are in this election coming up next Tuesday, and where we are with young people. Have we our goal obviously is to get as many young people to realize that they need to be out voting, that they need to either early vote or they need to be present on November 5th and vote. There's been a lot of work done to that effect. And I want to start with you, Jay Christopher. What have you been seeing out there as you're in the field, as you're working with millennials and young people? What kind of energy are you sensing around their desire to go out and vote?
I think we're just in a unique time in history. And now we are at a precipice or a heightened level where we are looking at two sides to our coin. Generation Z is a very progressive generation and a generation that doesn't take things sitting down. And so I do like that and the progressive nature of that. However, you still have people who are a little disconnected from politics just with the consideration of not believing that government is working on behalf of them. And so you have people who are disillusioned by conversation and decisions that are being made because it doesn't seem like it has a personal desired positive impact on people's lives. So that's something that we need to take into consideration. And then also just in general that we are communicating in a fashion that's able to be understood, as well as educating the masses on how government works in general. But nonetheless, there has been grave excitement across the board for this particular election, as we are in a historical precedent, having the first ever woman and first Black woman on a major party ticket to potentially be the president of the United States. And so there's great excitement about what a new tide in politics may look like and what progression may look like, as well as we understand, if we just pay attention to the landscape, that many of our policies today are being shaped by people who won't be able to live to see the effects of them on tomorrow. And so it's very personal that folks are in the game and in the fight for themselves, and people are coming to an understanding of how important it is to go to the ballot box and participate in the processes of decision making that will ultimately affect their lives on a daily basis.
All right, thank you, Jay Christopher. Brother Gray, let me ask you, as you look at the landscape, what's happening now, kind of the tone of all we see. Are you encouraged by what you see with young people getting out to vote? Are you still in any way concerned?
Well, I'm concerned, and first of all, I just look at the numbers. And when you look at the numbers of people who voted early in Orleans Parish, and I can't look at that number and see if they're young or old, that number is not what it should be. And a lot of people talking about the early voting is bigger than it normally has been nationally. That is not true in the state of Louisiana. We had a bigger vote in 2020 early vote than it appears as if we're going to have this time around. Now, having said that, there are a lot of groups out there that are trying to do things and are active. A coalition of groups, for example, in my church, we've had 5-minute discussions for the last 6 weeks where someone gets up and make a little speech about why they ought to be voting. 2 weeks ago, we had a rally at the church. We did a caravan and we went by 5 other churches with people joining at each of those other churches, and we all went to the early voting site to vote. And I'm told that that effort was being made at many churches in the city, even though I'm able to see just what happened in 5 other churches, 4 other churches, the 5 churches in the group with my church. So it's a lot of people out there working. There's a lot of people out there hustling. It's better than it has been for many elections, but it's not what it ought to be for this election. And of course, I think it's never what it ought to be. We will always be working to make it better next time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gray. You talk about those numbers. I've heard Gary Chambers talk some about the numbers in terms of people that have early voted, in terms of how many Black people are out there that could be voting and how many have voted thus far. And those numbers, as you indicated, are not what they should be. How many Black voters are there in the state of Louisiana? Are you aware of those? Can you share those numbers if you know them?
I would have them in front of me normally, but I don't have them in front of me. But Black voters make up about 31% of the vote in the state of Louisiana, and the state of Louisiana has a little over 2 million voters, and Black voters is about 31% of that. Mm-hmm. And the 31% is right. The 2 million, I may be a little off one way or the other.
Okay. And historically, how many? What's the percentage that we're getting out to vote during, I would say, major elections?
The best we can dream about, if you look at what we've done historically, is some parishes will get close to 70%. Orleans Parish is never one of the best parishes. The truth is, the best parishes are the river parishes between here and Baton Rouge. And I've talked to the leadership out there and say, man, what are you guys doing? Because you're doing a better job than we are. And I think they do a better job than us because the people there are more connected with each other. We are a big city where people come from a bunch of places, and everyone is not as tied into the community here as they are in, say, St. John Parish. So many people here don't even know our so-called leadership here. But in St. John Parish, everyone knows the so-called leadership there. And I use the term so-called because some people may think it's so-called, but for some reason, Orleans, the best Orleans is going to do historically, really is not much better than 50%. We didn't do much better than 50% with Obama.
All right. Well, maybe we'll get to that point on November the 5th. Let's talk about again, turning this back to young people. I'm interested in what both of you are hearing, and all of us as we talk to young people and talk to them about the importance of going out to vote. Those young people who strongly disagree and are adverse to showing up at the ballot box will give a reason for that, and stand on that as to why they do not want to participate in the democratic process or the electoral process of voting. What do y'all hear in terms of, or mainly, what is the main rationale around why a young voter may not go participate? Mr. Gray?
I wanted to defer to Mr. Johnson because he probably listens to more young people than I do. But I've been in the conversation, and first of all, many people, young and old, will start off by saying they're gonna do what they want to do anyway. They're not gonna pay attention to what we want. And my response to that is generally they're gonna do what you let them do. And the truth is, politicians. Well, there's a couple of things going on. First of all, in this country, we have a division that we haven't seen like this for a long time. The truth is, we've seen it this bad before. I'm old enough to remember when division was worse than what we think we have now, where politicians, all of our elected officials were being derogatory toward the African American community in public, not on the side, but in public. And thankfully, we got away from that a little bit, and look like we're getting back to that now. Certainly with one of the candidates for president, he certainly seems to care nothing about what people think about what he says about people. But I think that we have to convince people that they have something at stake, and that politicians do make a difference, and it makes a difference which politician you elect. I remind people that every family I know, particularly every Black family, there is someone who is now alive because of Obamacare, who would be dead and buried if it wasn't for Obamacare. And I remind them that there are some politicians whose pledge is to kill it, and there are some people whose pledge is to keep it. So if you want to keep your grandmother, your mama, your daddy alive, that's something you need to worry about. You need to point to issues like that you say it doesn't make any difference to me. The truth is, it does make a difference to you. And there are some places we can point to show them where it makes a difference to them.
Absolutely, absolutely, and as you said, we have one candidate, Donald Trump, who is surely going to make it his primary goal to make sure that he gets rid of the Affordable Care Act in whatever way he can. I believe that's his vendetta that he seeks to accomplish, because he wasn't able to accomplish it the first time. And so, and as you said, there are people that are alive because of it. Jay Christopher, do the young people that you speak to, do you think that they truly have a handle on what really is at stake? Do they understand the magnitude of what we can lose and what's in jeopardy if Donald Trump assumes this office?
So I know there are many complaints as it surrounds voter participation among young people. And I'll just start off by saying that every feeling that the young person is experiencing is valid for whatever reason and from whichever it stems from. And I think that the challenge that many people who may have come before us, the difference is marching orders were just marching orders. You just did as you did once upon a time. We're of a generation where you need to earn the vote, and you need to communicate in a fashion in which the vote will be earned. It's not a matter of if folks know what's at stake or not, but it's a matter of who do I feel will be most authentic in whatever their fight is and whatever their stance is. And so while I also may have my personal frustration as it pertains to people who are not participating in the voting or the electoral process, that's just me, because that's just my background, and I do have a different type of understanding as it pertains to the inner workings of government and how government works. But the reality is that we've had politicians who have been in office who have been very much so deceitful and who have not honed in on the promises that they have committed on the campaign trail. And if you can't commit to a promise, we just need to have some type of inkling of hope that you will be fighting in an era of progress without making promises or commitments that cannot be kept. And so we are also in a government where an infrastructure is built that creates it to be most difficult to see any sort of process, and makes it most difficult for the layman's individual to understand how processes work, how ordinances become ordinances, how bills become law, the timing that things happen. So we're looking at things like the John Lewis Civil Rights Act that was passed in the House, but it hasn't passed the Senate. Why? You have two priorities that are differentiating in the House and the Senate. You have a conservative and you have a liberal base. Well, if people don't understand government, folks will never understand until you have a majority on that side, or you have a president who is willing to support that bill would just, be at a standstill until it had that support. But this is very much so intentional. We don't have civics anymore. We don't have government anymore. And this is why Mobilizing Millennials was birthed as well, to serve as an educational hub and as well as a policy think tank, because there's a great disconnect. But nonetheless, there has to be some sort of genuine connectivity toward young folk without the expectation that you should vote just because you should vote. And I understand that we are in perilous times, and it makes my head a little wonky as to why folks are not participating in this process, because we are a vote away from fascism. But the reality is these are people's lived experiences, and young people have experienced some stuff. We talk about older folks, but whether it's 9/11, whether it's Hurricane Katrina, whether it's Ebola, whether it's, the swine flu, whatever the case may be, there's so much that has happened in such a short amount of time that patience isn't there. And we are a generation about putting your money where your mouth is.
Very good. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about strategies. We're a week out as of tomorrow, as we all know, from the election. We're eager to get our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors to the ballot box. Some people believe in I've heard some people talk about applying pressure in terms of, you're not going to sit at my Thanksgiving table if you didn't go out and vote. Yeah, you don't need to come over to my house and do this if you didn't go out and vote. Obviously, that can be a bit extreme, but in some instances, maybe it works. Is it that we what is the correct? Let me just put it that way. What is an appropriate or effective, I'll say, strategy that encourages and will compel a young person? Obviously, we talked about what they can lose, but what else? What for those who are trying to get young people there to vote, making sure they don't miss that opportunity on next Tuesday? What's an effective strategy to get them there, Brother Gray?
Keep letting me go first. Well, first of all,
Brother Gray,
we're all victims of our background experiences and whatever. First of all, for the people who are close to me, the answer is you don't come to Thanksgiving dinner if you don't vote. The answer is this. I don't have to explain to you. This is your obligation. I feed you, I clothe you, I've given you a lifetime of love and affection, and I have an expectation that unless you have better information than me, you will trust me and follow my advice on this and most other things. Now, it never happens exactly like that. My children, once they get grown, will tell you about all the times they didn't really do exactly what you said. But in some environments, and I think, and we say young people, millennials, I don't know where we're drawing the line on the age that we were talking about, but for 18-year-olds, that first group of people, my daddy used to solve most debates with me. He would say, "Are you grown?" And I understood. If I was grown, I could do what I wanted to do, but then I had to do what a man had to do and take care of himself. If I wasn't grown, I did what I thought was my family obligation. So I blame, for the very young people, I blame the parents, not the young people. I mean, I find it amazing that parents can want their children to do things and not be able to get their children to do it. Now, once people become adults, or when people grow up in a family that may have a different view from you, about things like voting, then it becomes a problem of convincing them. And of course, I say you convince them by going down the list. Uh, Many people think what they have always had and will always have. But I start with the Affordable Health Care Act. There is not many people in this city who doesn't have some loved one who's going to die if the Republicans get their way. There is someone who's going to have to start feeding their grandmother if the Republicans get their way, because Social Security is going to change, because meals for old folks is going to change. There are some people in school who will have to drop out of school because the Republicans would have closed Southern University a long time ago. Politics created Southern University, and politics has kept Southern University alive. And when you say, well, I don't see what I got, well, you rarely get everything you want because it's always a fight over everything you get. But there's a lot of stuff we have that we didn't have once upon a time, and politics got it for us, and politics can lose it. And I tell people that, and I argue with people on the corner. Well, I can't say do it because I say do it, but I go down that list of things that I think they stand to lose. They don't elect the right people.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of those things too is, you know, when we look at Vice President Harris and the things that she said in terms of those things that would help build generational wealth, $25,000 to for a first-time home owner. I think is it 25 or 50 for those who want to start businesses. And so many young people now, you ask them what they want to do, that one of the first things they'll say is they want to be a business owner. Well, this is the way to do that. This is the way to own your own home one day. And so there's so much to lose and also so much to gain as well too. And we've got to make that clear that this is going to allow you to build a life for yourself that you would otherwise not possibly be able to have. Do you agree with that?
I do.
Yeah. And I think too, and I'll move to Jay Christopher with this too, but I think too, the young people, somehow we need to make it clear that these Republican governors, such as Governor Landry, are going to become even more emboldened with some of their things that they are trying to enact and put in place that will also take us back in time if the Republican candidate is placed into office. More.
And I apologize to Mr. Johnson if I'm talking too much, but let me tell you, police brutality. Young people may say the police are terrible and they mistreat us, but that's because they don't know what the police used to be like. And they don't know what the police would be like if Trump got his way and gave them 100% immunity. And which Trump says police ought to have 100% immunity, which means they can slap you around, they can kill you, and there's no remedy for that. Now, It's hard to think of that if you've never seen it. But for those who have seen it, realize that what we call police brutality today, I mean, and police kill people every once in a while today. They used to kill people all the time. And politics has reduced it, hadn't gotten rid of it, but it's a whole lot better than it used to be.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jay Christopher, would you like to weigh in on this in terms of strategies to get our young people to the polls? Do they understand what there is to lose if the Republican candidate gets into office? What's really is effective? And first, tell us, when we say millennials, are we talking about ages up until 36?
So the millennial generation is those between 1981 and 1996. Thereafter, you have Generation Z that starts from 1997 to about 2011. Then from 2012, you start Generation Alpha. But nonetheless, as I'm just hearing conversation, there's a disconnect in education, and there's also a privilege that certain folk have as it pertains to just understanding structures. And I think that much of the focus in conversation that I've been observing thus far on the call has been so much as to what is going to be lost, and fear tactics just do not work with us. And I think oftentimes we don't invest energy as it pertains to what it is that we have the possibility of gaining, and then also calling things out appropriately for what they are. And this is no trope to the former councilman, but nonetheless, like things like Obamacare, we have to understand that that name came from Republicans in a negative light. It is the Affordable Care Act, and young people need to understand what the Affordable Care Act is, and how the different sections can aid people who may be senior in their households, right? Or just even paying attention to what's happened under the Biden administration, capping insulin at $30 for those who are of that particular age as the policy was drafted out, right? But fear tactics don't work. And if you pay attention right now to the household, a lot of young people have chosen families because families at home are not identifying with the things that they might particularly identify with. And so you oftentimes have conversation now as to why the young person ain't coming to the dinner table. Well, I didn't feel safe as a young person. And then there's just this autonomous expectation to just not to go with the grain, right? But I have to remind folks who are older than me, you all had an idea of what it is that you wanted, right? Even though you may have had frustration with your parent, and you still felt that you were right, and you still might stand in that conviction. But nonetheless, we can't be do as I say, not as I do society, or just do it without some sort of comprehension and understanding. And when every child is questioning something or wondering something, is always you're talking back. So we have to gain an understanding. And then when it comes to the severity of conversations like this, and then you're afraid to ask questions of clarity of understanding, then where does that fall back on, right? And so this whole conversation has everything to do with education. And then we need to talk about education as it pertains to understanding, again, governmental structures and how things work, why policies are established, understanding that there is conservative policies versus liberal policies, understanding that you can have a liberal politician promoting conservative policies, as you can have a conservative politician promoting liberal policies. And then also making a conscious decision to talk about what is it that we will gain, right? Such as under the Harris administration discussing an opportunity economy, right? And giving a tax cut to those who are starting small businesses, or those Black men specifically who are starting small businesses, right? So we have to pay attention to what are those things that we are looking forward to acquiring versus those things that we are scared to lose out on. And some of those things you may ask that are in place right now, some folk might say it's already skeletal, right? So what's the point? We need to be fighting for even more, right? So I don't think that it's just a tactic of the not wanting to participate, but what is the value of what I am participating in? And there has to be a value brought back and an integrity brought back to how politics work and the people who are in position to run the system.
Absolutely. Thank you, J. Christopher. I want to open it up to some questions from those who are participating. But before I do that, what organizations and we'll talk about what organizations are doing some really incredible work that you know of in mobilizing and encouraging young people to get to the ballot box. And that's part one of that question. And part two is, what have you seen over the course of this campaign that seems like it's never ending, that has been one incident or that has really just stuck out in your mind as it pertains to young people and them voting, that has just excited you and been like, wow, that's it. That is absolutely amazing. And that's the kind of energy that we need to see more of, that you can communicate, maybe take that incident, communicate to other young people and say, this is what's happening here, and we need to do the same. So two-part question: who's doing incredible work, and what have you seen that's really excited you that maybe others have not taken notice of? J. Christopher.
Like the Power Justice Coalition is doing a great job with informing and educating voters. Bike and Vote is doing a great job with various events and biking to the polls and getting the word out as well. Bella La Femme Society is based between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. They're doing a great job of getting out the vote. Women with a Vision, ran by Executive Director Dion Haywood, are doing a good job. They actually have a Get Out the Vote Center that they've opened. Black Pride New Orleans organization, the Human Rights Campaign, the House of BGIU and France LLC, many community organizations have been doing some great work to generally educate folks, get the word out, and help people physically get to the polls. But nonetheless, for me, I'm just paying attention to how people are influenced. So I'm really excited to see how folks reacted to both Beyonce and Taylor Swift. Pop culture is very influential, and those are people from different audiences. But when those numbers come together, they have an astronomical voting power. So when it comes to influence and it comes to positivity, those are people that they gravitate towards because they exude the positivity that they're looking towards. And so when you have people who have that type of influence into that magnitude, it goes to show you the strength that we can really have together when we come together, right? Not just addressing things on the national platform, but also paying attention to what's happening on our state level. As we understand, in January, we had a special session of a crime session that was very much so detrimental. We just had regular session, right? Where now you can just carry a gun and concealed carry it without having a license at this point, right? There are so many things that have been enacted. They're about to convene again about insurance. I believe next week, right? So there are so many things that are even happening even now, and even local ordinances as well that people need to zero in on to. But I think that there is just a great excitement now about knowing that something can happen differently when I do participate in the election process, and they're making it cool to do so.
Yes, and that's it. It's got to be cool, and certainly Taylor Swift, and as you mentioned, Beyonce. To the star power that come behind Vice President Harris and so many others has just been really something incredible to witness that I've not seen to this magnitude before. So that is certainly exciting. Mr. Gray, in terms of what organizations and what has excited you about what you have witnessed during this campaign?
Well, there are a lot of organizations out there that are working and have been working in this campaign and in previous campaigns. Some of the fraternities and sororities, the leadership. I talked about the effort I saw at the churches. They're in conjunction with some of the organizations that Mr. Johnson named, but the warm bodies in the churches that I saw were Deltas. There are a number of other social organizations that have come together and tried to push things, I guess, with some effect. Now, the truth is, I started off by saying I haven't been excited because I've been disappointed about where we are. I just looked at, and I'm looking right now, in 2020 in Orleans Parish, we cast 101,000 early votes. Right in the last report we got here, we've cast 59,000 votes. So we're 42,000 votes behind where we were in 2020, which we have today and tomorrow. I hope we do very well today. I don't have the day's numbers yet. I hope we do very well tomorrow, but I think it's probably little chance that we're going to get 80% of what we got 4 years ago. Another thing that I find very telling is if you look at what has happened as of the last report, which I guess included Saturday, Orleans had the 59,000 votes that I indicated. But we were substantially behind Jefferson Parish, East Baton Rouge Parish, that have about the same number of voters. But we were even behind St. Tammany Parish, which has substantially fewer voters than us. So while a lot of people are out there pushing and shoving and trying to get something to happen, the truth is, I don't think we should congratulate ourselves right now about what we have done, because if you compare it with 2020, I think we're going to be way behind where we were in 2020. Now, having said that, I think this election cycle in Orleans Parish, not in Orleans Parish, in the state of Louisiana, we're going to elect a second Democratic congressman, which is a good thing. We have already elected a second Democratic Supreme Court justice for the state, which is a great thing. So we've gotten some progress this cycle, and we're going to be a little bit better off here in the state than we were before this election cycle. And no one thought that we were going to win the state for the Democratic side, and I don't think we are either. But I think the better we do, the more we can congratulate ourselves and say, we worked hard, we're able to get something done. If we work a little bit harder, if we get a little bit smarter, perhaps we can get more done. The final thing I would say, and to those people who talk about the approach that should be used. For example, I call the Affordable Health Care Act, I call it Obamacare. And I'm well aware of the fact that the Republicans called it Obamacare because they thought that was a negative thing. I call it Obamacare to say, hey, I think it is going to be, when history writes about what President Obama did, I think the Affordable Health Care Act is going to be his greatest achievement. Because it was a heck of an achievement that incidentally, people, both Republicans and Democrats, had tried to do something like that for the last 40 years and had been unsuccessful with it. And Obama got it done. And I think that's something for Obama to brag about, and I'm happy to call it Obamacare. But it's an ongoing process. No matter what happens in this election, we ought to immediately start for the next election. And every 4 years is not how you build an army. You build an army by fighting every day. And in fact, I talked about spending the year as the executive director of the state party. Most of that year I spent complaining to the national party because they have a strategy of looking at the states, deciding where they can win, and putting all their effort there. Incidentally, the national party is not putting any effort in Louisiana. And I tell them that is the dead wrong way to do it because, and I use the phrase, I'm an old military guy, you can't build an army without fighting battles. Even if you decide you're not going to win this time, to make us stronger, you have to fight this time, and the next time, and the next time. I hope the attitude changes, that after this election, that first of all, we realize our accomplishments, because it's a big deal to have that second congressional district. It's a big deal to have that second Democrat on the state Supreme Court. And that may be all we accomplish in this state. I hope and think Kamala Harris may well win. And I think it's a bigger deal than Obama to elect a woman who happens to be half Black and half Asian. I think that is the absolute fulfillment of the American dream. If we as a nation can get that done, and we might get it done this time around.
Absolutely. I feel that same optimism that we may get it done. Thank you for sharing that. Let's move to some questions. I'm anxious to get other people that may want to add to this conversation engaged in it. Valerie, do you see anybody with any questions or comments?
Yes, I have a question before Brooke come. I know she's coming. So I have a question. First of all, I want to make a thank you, a gratitude. I really appreciate you, Mr. Gray and Mr. Johnson, for coming. I thank you all so much because you all are the face of senior and younger. Look, we have senior and younger here, so y'all giving 2 point of views, and I really appreciate it. I thank you guys. So, but I have this concern. Okay, like 20 years ago, over 30 years ago, I was blessed to be assistant teacher in Magnolia, Mississippi, first graders. And I found out that the education system was short. So they moved me into a teacher status. I had fifth graders. And with those fifth graders, I found out the ones who was privileged, they thought they could do anything they want. They took things for granted. And the ones who I want to say didn't have it, they had to work for it, they appreciate it more. And they don't, once I gave them something or I showed them the way and they learned and they did it, and I found out they kept it and they appreciate it more than the ones who were privileged. So in my mind, the youth, the young adults, they privilege. I feel it, they privilege. And they have not seen or felt the pressure like in 1970 or 1980, what they got now from our backs, right? From the ones who were born in 1951, who were born in 1960. So give me your thoughts on, do you think that the young adults are privileged? Do you think that we give them too much? When I say we give them too much, such as 6-year-old have cell phones now, such as the RTA bus. I'm not talking about the schedule, y'all. I'm talking about the RTA bus is available, right? Then they have school buses to take the children to school. But guess what? The kids, they don't want to ride the school bus. They don't want to ride the RTA. They want their mom and dad to pick them up and take them to school and pick them up. So do you think that the youth these days are too privileged? That's why they don't understand how the laws work. That the law will govern our daily lives, our safety, our insurance, our housing, our schools. We're having problem right now with schools because of the laws. So if we I want to say engage in more, like you were saying, Mr. Johnson, more civil laws, more education about why you have what you have now. Explain to them how the law works. This would change if this happened. If this don't happen, you will go back instead of forward. If this do happen, we will continue to move forward for all races, all culture. So can y'all give me y'all thoughts? I'm just babbling. Can you understand what I'm trying to say?
Let me say this. I teach a class that's is the legal environment of business is what it's called. In the class, I get to talk about Brown v. Board of Education and Dred Scott. And I say I get to talk about it. It's not in the book, but I work it into the class. I've been there about 10 semesters now. I have not had one student yet who knew what Brown v. Board of Education was on the first day. And I'm at a Black school in a Black city with, I think every one of my students are being Black students. And not one of them had ever heard of Brown v. Board of Education. Not one of them had ever heard of Dred Scott. Now, I had one young lady raise it because I guess I evidenced I was a little disappointed that no one was surprised or something. And one young lady raised her hand and said, Professor, you need to understand you're dealing with public school kids from Orleans Parish. And I said to her, I said, young lady, don't put that on Orleans Parish. You should have heard of Brown v. Board of Education at your church, at your house, or standing on the corner. You know, a 22-year-old Black college student should know what Brown v. Board of Education is. So clearly, I think the adults have failed the youth in not educating them on things they should know about. Um, I do think middle class folks have a real problem in teaching their kids to struggle. Uh, I think the most important thing a person can have is a good feeling about themselves and a feeling that they can do whatever they want to do. They have the power to do it. But you have to get that from your parents, from your church. You'll be lucky if you get that from a teacher at school. Some people do. Um, and you have to know you can struggle and make it. And most middle class kids haven't struggled, so they can't handle the struggle. And they don't think they should struggle. And that's a problem. That's the fault of the parents and the grandparents.
I agree. I agree. What's your thoughts, Mr. Johnson?
I think it just goes back to the educational component as a whole. And we got to just look at how policies have to just shape time. And I don't blame a young person for something that they don't know, being reared in a society that you're supposed to be nurtured by. And so when I think about expectations being lowered from GLEs or grade level expectations, and then you just have your common core curriculum. So just me understanding how we're looking at education on the federal level. And then let's pay attention to the state, where we have a BESE board, or a Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. That's a free, which isn't a paid position. However, you can live wherever you want to live, literally outside of the state. And you can be on that board making decisions for our young people due to the influence of corporate dollars. You can look at your local school boards where Orleans Parish, is just getting back control of the board. And we're looking at the state of Louisiana that once had an RSD, or Recovery School District. And shortly after that, you had Hurricane Katrina. Then shortly after that, you had the experiment that became the charter system. It's an educational disconnect. Me desiring to get to school a certain way, or just being around the evolution of technology, I don't think it's something that is creating a separation. We got to get hip with the times, but the reality is, it is the responsibility of those who've come before to do the just do and to educate the young person.
Okay, I totally agree with you.
Let me say this, and maybe we are agreeing on a little bit, because those who come before, for me, those the parents and the preachers. To the extent for Black people, and in my world, the government was often the enemy of Black people. You didn't expect the government to save you. You didn't expect the government education system to let you know what you needed to know about the world. You learned what you needed to know about the world at home from your church. And even in Orleans Parish, where Black people have gotten in control really for the last 30 years, unfortunately, in some cases, you think you're in control, but you don't really have the power to do what you thought you could do. In other cases, we've elected people who didn't have the same interests as we thought they would have. Because if that happens, you unelect them and get someone else. But you need to understand how the system works, because you need to know when there's a shortcoming. Is that a shortcoming because that elected official had a different view of the world? Or is that a shortcoming because the way the system is, that official didn't have the power that you thought they had, and maybe even they thought they had? But it is, education can solve everything. I believe that that's the ultimate solution to everything. And where you have Black control, hopefully, the public officials will be assisting in that education. But I think it starts at home and in the church, because you can't trust the government to give your kids an education to change the government. Especially if you believe, as I do, that many times the government's the enemy. Why would the enemy help you change them?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a hand up. I also believe like Mr. Johnson organization and Black Voters Matter, NAACP, and our organization that's in our community, maybe they can start a civic class or have a community class that teach our young adults, and we can, as neighbors or family members, we can support it because we got to teach our own. We can't depend on no one to teach our own. Because we have a question about Miss Brooke.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page here, really. I was just going to say that first of all, I think every generation believes that the one under them is privileged. You know, I think we all fail in that respect, and we all think the next one, oh, they're all so spoiled, they're all so whatever it happens to be, fill in the blanks.
So.
What?
That's true. We all agree with that, I think.
If not, that tells me that something wasn't fought for and something wasn't won, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a good thing, really. Right. So then I think that we cannot blame the kids for any of this. I don't think that's where any of the blame goes at all. It doesn't really go to the parents either, because the school system here has been screwed up for a long time. And as soon as George Bush decided that No Child Left Behind had to happen, then we screwed up all the education all over the country, and we took civics out of the school. And that's where I learned. I mean, I had parents who were both involved politically when I was young, but if I hadn't had that, I would have learned in my civics class that that was an obligation of every single citizen in the United States. Also, the Black kids in this city are not learning the civil rights history. If you know that voting is a valued commodity, you know, then you cherish it and you do something with it. But if you don't know the history behind that, and this is all on purpose, you know, this isn't by mistake that people don't know this stuff. This is a good way to disenfranchise voters. And it's a good way to keep the young from moving things ahead if you want your state to stay just where it is in the dark ages. So I say we do everything we can, and I don't think enough people are paying attention to education in the city where we have the most input, to say that we need civics back on the docket right away. We need civics in every single classroom. You need to start when you're in second grade. You start then and you move it all the way up through the grades. And then you get a voting population. That's my preachy moment.
I sort of agree with you, except I don't trust the government to ever take care of it. And I think the schools will never do it. I think you have to do it at home. But let me just
but I don't think you can count on that at home either. We've got parents who are so stressed and don't know the civics themselves, so they can't teach it necessarily. And you've got to have a starting place.
It'll be nice to have it from somewhere else. I'm just saying I don't trust it from the government. But let me also say, many years ago, I got to New Orleans in '77. A bunch of us used to go to Dookie Chase and have red beans and rice on Monday and talk about how we were going to change the world. And we at some point went to, and during that time you had the first Black on the school board, then the second Black on the school board. I don't even remember their names now, but we'd go to them and talk about what ought to happen, and it never happened the way we thought it should happen. So we decided, one of the people in those meetings with us was Gail Glapion. And we decided if we can't talk to the elected officials, we'd go elect our own. And Gail Glapion's campaign became part of that Monday at Dookie Chase effort. Gail got elected, and we thought Gail was miles ahead of the people who were there ahead of her. Now, there might be some people who think Gail wasn't what she should have been, but she was a whole lot better than what had been before. And I say to people who are unhappy with politicians, go elect one. A couple of us, mostly not from here, got together and decided we didn't like the senator uptown, and we elected William Jefferson. Jeff was a guy from Lake Providence. I'm from Baton Rouge. Another one of the big guys in that group was from Baton Rouge. We had no ties, no connection, but we knocked doors all day, every day for 6 months. And we got William Jefferson elected over a guy who talked to the so-called important blacks, but ignored, we thought, the little guy. Now, some people may say Jeff messed up in some ways, and he did in some ways. But the point is, unconnected, poor, energetic people can change what's wrong with politicians, because you can go elect your own, especially on little things like school board.
But Dookie Chase gave you a format, and it gave you a pattern to work on. These kids don't have that. And I think we have to think moving ahead rather than constantly looking back and see what did happen. We have to come up with new ways for kids to do this stuff now.
Well,
the way they are.
I agree. I agree with that. And the generation ahead of us didn't do it at Dookie Chase, but Dookie Chase didn't give us a format. Dookie Chase was a restaurant that we just got together and said we will meet at this place and have lunch together and talk about the world.
Right.
And so for those young people, I'm not talking about the 18-year-olds, but for those 25-year-olds who are unhappy with the way the world is, they have the power to get together somewhere and say, where can we start? You may get off track.
Go teach them.
Say again?
Go teach them. Let's stop criticizing them. Let's go teach them how to do this.
Whenever I'm close to one of them, I try.
Yeah.
And I think we all ought to try to do that.
Yes, totally agree. Totally agree. We have Michon. Michon, you have a question?
Is that Michon Copeland?
It is.
It is. Okay. Her dad was one of those people at Dookie Chase on Mondays.
Yeah, she's just to be honest, she's a pillar.
Michon, you there?
Yes. Good evening, y'all. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. I just wanted to make a statement, and I agree with almost everything everybody's saying. Well, really everything. But as far as the youth with civics is in the classroom. It's a half a credit. However, this is the first year that they have to take the standardized test for civics. So they're failing them again. They're giving them a standardized test on a subject that's not even taught for a full year. So we really need to work on something to have that rectified. How can you get a standardized test on something that you're not taught? I was a civics teacher in the school, in a classroom. So civics it's a 10th grade elective. However, they don't push it. So they normally don't take it until 12th grade, because when they're going over their classes that are outstanding, they realize that they didn't take that civics half a credit. Now, did it change to a whole credit this year? I haven't followed up since last year. I'm not sure. But as of last year, it was just a half a credit. And this year, the testing was implemented.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Ms. Michon.
Okay. Let me just quickly say, one of the people who used to be there on Mondays was Sherman Copeland. And when Sherman Copeland was just...
or at Dookie Chase.
at Doogie Chase. And he
Okay.
was just, he wasn't the Sherman Copeland he became. He was just a little dude who wanted to help change the world. And he did. He did a lot.
Amen.
So to maintain the attention with this standardized testing thing, we need to pay attention to, as I was mentioning before, the Bessie Board of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. These are people who are elected but not paid, but these are the people who are determining what the curriculum looks like in classrooms on all grade levels and are determining what standardized tests will be done, all right? And like I said before, when it comes to qualifications, you do not have to be a resident of this state in order to qualify or to sit in that seat. So those elections that we think may not matter or may not get that much attention, or that might be the only thing that's on the ballot, you got to show up and you got to vote.
Correct. Some money people have messed with the school systems all over the United States of America. And if we let the guy with the most money win the school board races, our interests will never be looked out for. So the only way you deal with that is have a bunch of people who are willing to go work without money to get your Gail Glapion elected.
So the last question is gonna be like a action question. So Mr. Gray and Mr. Johnson, what you all think? We got one more day of early voting, then we have the final vote November the 5th. So what you all think that we need to be doing right now to get the young adults voting, everybody voted? Because I put in a link, I put in the chat a link of the poll from the 26th. So I haven't received the update yet, but that's the last poll that I received that's going on right now in New Orleans Parish. So what you all think that we need to be doing like tomorrow and for November the 5th to get the percentage, more people to the poll to vote? We're gonna start with you, Mr. Gray.
Everyone, first of all, there are a lot of people out there hustling. They need to continue the hustle, and every one of us need to reach out to everyone we can touch and try to get them to go vote and get all their friends to go vote. And I don't know anything other than to tell them we expect it of you. Those 800 people, and I don't see any of them online that Julia sent the email to. Those are a bunch of kids that we have touched with the AXO program. We have said to those kids repeatedly that we expect, most of them are too young to vote, but some are old enough to vote. But we've told all those parents, we're doing all this stuff with you, we expect you to vote. Now, the truth is, we don't have the means of checking to see if they did vote, but all of them are gonna lie to us and say they voted because they're in trouble with our group if they don't tell that lie or vote, whichever is the case. So the people you can tell them what to do, tell them to vote. The people you have to reason with, go reason with them. But touch as many people as you can between now and November the 5th to get them to vote. And realize this is an all the time thing. This is not a once every 4-year deal. You have to do it, as Mr. Johnson said, every election. And I tell people, the presidential election doesn't make much difference to most people on the streets in New Orleans. It's the small elections that really change your life. The most important people to you are the judges who will be sitting in court if you end up in court one day. Whether you're suing to see how much money you get or whether you are trying to see how much time you're about to get. Those people probably make more difference to you than the next president. The school board makes more difference to you than any president on the little personal level. And we need to work on all those things all the time.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I would just remind us to always have conversation. Every time you're talking with somebody, always bring up the election. Always talk about voting, okay? but definitely give a listening ear to young people. Like I said, the voices of young people matter, as well as the veracity and the validity of whatever their concerns is surrounding the election process. So definitely put a charge out there to keep the conversation going and keep the conversation alive. Let's talk about elections in a positive light to actually encourage folks to actually want to get out there. I think oftentimes when we feel the need of dread and just discontentment, you know, you don't feel so energized to want to participate in this thing. But let's go ahead and promote the excitement and the wellness that we can have behind such electing certain people in certain positions for our benefit. And I think that we have a greater turnout in our reelection season.
Thank you, thank you. Before y'all leave, though, can y'all tell us, in y'all last remark, can y'all tell us more about your organization that you're working with for this? Because this forum gonna be spread out all over Louisiana. It will be spread out on our YouTube page. So, in the meantime, we would need to let the world know about your organization, how you working with the young adults and with the youth. Starting with you, Mr. Johnson.
You can go to our Instagram at Mobilizing Millennials, or you can go to our website at www.mobilizingmillennials.org. Thanks so much for having me always, Justice and Beyond. Really was honored and excited to be here on tonight.
Thank you for coming. Mr. Gray.
In terms of the organization, I guess my organization is NAACP, the AXO program have, and I say we have an email list of about 800 kids that we've worked with, and that list is going to get longer. And just to let people know, and that's not really doing much on voting because many of those kids are young kids, but just to let you know, AXO is an academic Olympics, and the city of New Orleans was #1 in the United States of America in 2023 in academic Olympics with all our terrible school system that everyone talks about. And also we were second to Houston in 2024. And when I say that, a lot of people say, oh, the charter schools and the private schools, most of our kids are public school kids. And we're doing now in conjunction, we are also working on getting kids scholarships. And all of you have reached kids. There's a bunch of scholarships. You ought to go to our website, AXO New Orleans website. But there's a group called FOSSI, FOSSI, that said they'll give a $40,000 scholarship to any kid going to a Black school majored in STEM. They say they have 250 of those scholarships to give out a year. The most they've given out so far is 130 because we don't get enough kids to apply. We're doing a bunch of other things, making kids aware of scholarships. We love help with that because we need to get more of our kids better educated. And a lot of folks who think they can't afford college, the truth is there's money out there to help them. But we just need to figure out a way to make them aware of it. And one other little thing I would say, if you go on the US Census reports, you'll be surprised to find that if you look at 25-year-olds and older, New Orleans has more college grads than Houston, Dallas, most cities in the United States. We are not as bad as everyone tells us we are. We're not San Francisco or Atlanta, better than Houston and Dallas and a whole bunch of other cities.
Wow. What a great positive note to leave us with. Thank you so much, Jay Christopher and Mr. James Gray, for being here tonight. Let me say this in closing. Look, we all have been given a certain amount of people that we are in contact with every day, whether it be in our families, in our social activities, wherever we go. We may not be able to change everybody, but certainly we can change somebody and impact somebody in the way that they think. And you'd be surprised at what and how you can personally educate somebody and give them some information that they may not have ever heard before, or perspective that they may not have ever thought of before, and thus change their mind to do something such as voting that they would never have considered doing before. So go out and use your power to the best of your ability. As we close tonight, we want to take any announcements that anybody might have. Again, thank you, Mr. Gray and Jay Christopher, for being here tonight. Any announcements that anybody wants to share as in terms of any upcoming events that we need to be aware of so that we can show up for and participate in? Anybody know of anything? Okay, we're all quiet. Maybe not. No one else?
No.
Well,
There's the election next, a couple
That's
of
right.
Tuesdays from now. We can go do that.
There's
that's it.
sign wavings that they're asking for help with in the mornings and in the afternoons. Their OPTEC is spearheading different sign waving for Kamala, for Troy, and for Eric Jones.
Michelle,
And
are you on OPDEC this year?
I am.
Do y'all have the vote list? Can y'all host phone calls?
They've been doing it.
Okay, tell us where to send people for that.
You would have to talk to Dr. Boyd because they've been doing, or if it's New Orleans East, you could talk to Dr. Patrice Santino.
Okay.
Both of them have been really, really active in that.
Right. Very good. Very good. Yeah, certainly. Getting involved in OPDEC. I know we as a member of OPDEC too, we've been doing sign waving at the corner of South Claiborne and Napoleon. So get involved. You're able to just stop by. You see us out there waving signs or anybody else, you can jump in, park your car at Walgreens or CVS and come on over. And then by all means get out and vote next Tuesday, and we will all be praying the same prayer, I'm sure. Any other announcements?
Yeah, I was hoping that Richard say something about who we're having next week with Stella Cement. Maybe.
Richard Sack. Is he there?
He may not be near the thing. So we're having Stella Cement on the forum next week, and she will talk about the upcoming vote, I guess, that the council will have on the dissent decree.
All right.
And then a week later, I believe that we are going to be having sorry, I won't even say what we'll have the next week because I'm still confused.
All right.
All
We'll
right.
get it. Yeah,
But next week we will have Stella Cement.
Thanks, Brooke. Any other announcements? All right, very good, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. Let's close in prayer as we go our separate ways on this evening. Oh God, we ask God that you would help us all realize our power, that we have power in our voice, power in our action, power in our mobilizing, power in our engagement, in everything, power in even our service one to each other. To change lives. So God, we pray that we would just realize that, walk in that, step into that. God, to realize that we are not powerless, we are not hopeless. We are overcomers, and we just want to step forward into next week believing that we are not going back. That there is a greater good, and there is humanity is especially in these United States, is better than what some of us are seeing right now. That is going to turn around, and that God, there are good people who want the right leader to be in place. So God, use us, empower people, empower our young people, and God, we just ask that our minds will be blown, that we would all just see after next week the power of those who have come forward to take their place in making history. We ask all of this in the name of Almighty God and my Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you, everybody. God bless you. Go out.